Alright, so this is the glove box I started with in order to make my electronic control compartment, if you will. Basically, in order to add all the parts I really just talked about, I cut off the back of the glove box and used the backing plate that the glove box is mounted to in order to wire in all my accessories. So basically what we did was we cut a little slot at the top there. We started wiring in all our components. I used a bunch of terminal strips. Right there is where the power is going to come in. That's going to power everything in this box. The point of doing it this way was to be able to take this box back out, move it to another vehicle if I wanted to, or return the truck back to stock if I needed to. So I didn't cut into any of the factory wiring to do this. The only things I had to tap into were the ignition switch just to trigger the relays in order to make things operate off the ignition switch. Now, that's the back of the box where I mounted the up top here we've got the infrared controller. That's for the LEDs because they're RGB LEDs, and there's a strip there. I was trying to figure out why I was zooming at this point, and I finally figured out that I was holding the camera wrong and pushing the zoom button the entire time. So on the top of this, we've got, coming out of the slot, we've got that infrared controller for the LEDs. That is for the sensor, the impact sensor for the alarm. Extra wires are coiled up and just stored on top, and it kept the inside of the box nice and clean. Also used a bunch of riveted inserts there. We'll talk about those again in a minute. So anyway, positive from the battery comes to that bottom lug I just pointed to. The top lug is the negative from the battery, and all my ground and positive leads come off of those two areas. This 3-switch panel I made is for controlling the LED zones. First one allows the instrument cluster to light up. The second one controls the footwell lights and underdash lighting and vent lighting, as well as the climate controls. And the third switch is to turn on the LEDs on the amp rack where the subwoofers are mounted. So that allows me to have control over which lights I'm using and when, so that I can have my dash lights on without having to have everything else on. And when you close it all up, it just looks like a stock glove box. So there it is, all mounted. Ended up having to cut the sides off the glove box in order to get the door harnesses to come through cleanly from the sides. It looks a little bit like a rat's nest there. I don't have a good picture of it. When I finally finished actually zip tying and wrapping everything correctly, but that's the gist of it right there. It doesn't also doesn't have the plastic covers over the fuses, but everything's been labeled at this point and installed. And that's what it looks like. I also had a strap to keep the door from falling all the way open, but in this picture it hadn't been installed yet. So in order to get the power directly off the battery, we went ahead and used these multi-wire terminals on the battery. And I'm using fuses, maxi fuses I guess they're called, in line right next to the battery. You can see those next to the power steering reservoir, and you can see the amp rack power laying there not hooked up yet. I brought the wires in through the area behind the blower motor, where the factory harness comes through the firewall. That way I was able to utilize the same boots and keep moisture out. And in another video I'll show you where I completely took all of the dashboard, all the climate controls and everything, the firewall pad and all of it out, soap and watered everything, got it cleaned up, got rid of all the old smells, and restored all of that. Again, I'll show you that in another video. So once that power was brought in, we were able to, well, I guess we're going to do something else first. Here I cut the slot in the top of the mounting bracket for the glove box that allowed me to run the wiring through in a neat, clean fashion. There it is. And here I am laying out the components, starting with the fuse panel and one of these little relay blocks, or whatever, terminal blocks I think they're called. There's installing all the components and just having the wiring laying around loosely. Here's where I'm starting to clean the wiring up and install a few things. You can see that some fuses are starting to go into it. A little more cleanup going on there. And just giving you an idea, there's the bracket I made for the LED switches. Basically just folded a piece of sheet metal and drilled some holes in it, rounded off the edges, painted it black, and used the same screws as the glove box already had from the factory for its other components. And there it is, basically done as far as everything that's doing off the truck. That's the LED strip mounted to the back. I also put a piece of tape on there to hold the wires so they wouldn't get yanked out. And again, there it is installed in the vehicle. Just another shot of it. So once that was done, I needed to get the doors wired up. So we took out the manual window regulators and we put in door poppers and factory power window regulators. Made it nice and easy to just bolt those in. So once I had that all in, it was time to start thinking about wiring. So in order to mount these terminal blocks into sheet metal, and anywhere I use screws into sheet metal, I want to use threaded rivets. So you drill a hole to the appropriate size, and then you take the appropriate size threaded rivet, install it in the installation tool, and then you stick that through the hole, squeeze the living daylights out of it, and what you end up left with is a nice little rivet that's securely mounted with threads in it that you can just put a bolt into. You do that twice, and now you've got enough to mount my terminal block. I also did that offset over that hole for a reason. So take the appropriate screw, maybe put a little blue Loctite on there just to keep things from rattling loose, install the terminal block, and through that little opening I kind of half covered, I could run my wiring up onto that block. I use these blocks because they're really nice for being able to test with a test light, and they got a plastic cover to keep them from grounding. So in order to mount that bottom block, I needed to drill some holes in order to bring the wires in at a straighter angle. So I went ahead and drilled some holes in a stylish fashion, and then mounted the terminal block back on. And then I also, well, it's a little out of sequence, but there I am making the wiring harness for the doors. We went ahead and used some shrink wrap, hit them with the heat gun, and then went ahead and installed those in the same grommets as the factory power mirror wiring, and then we just installed it all into the door, so it came out with a nice factory clean finish, nice and sealed from the elements. There it is laying through there in the inside and in the door. And once we got everything hooked back to the terminal blocks, that's what it looked like. Alright, so let's just check. Has some power? Yes. This should have power, that should have power, that should have power. That. Okay, so we do have power. So we do have power at the door. Okay. I just realized something though. It's going to be really hard to roll the windows up and down since I haven't hooked the motors up yet. So let's do that. Up is blue, and I went blue to blue, so up is the blue one, which is the white one here, so down is green. Come on, really? So a fork style connector would have made it a lot easier to just slide underneath the screw and tighten down, but I don't like things coming apart, and I don't like things being able to come loose and rattle off. So I went ahead and used the loop and took the screws out, put them through the loop, and then screwed it back in. A little bit more of a pain in the butt, but I know that way they're not going to fall out even if the screw does rattle itself loose. Alright. Okay, so we got power going here. Alright. Well, the door locks work. So let's do this. We have power right now. No, we don't. Ignition on. Okay, the ignition is on, so we do have power at accessory. And we do have power at the switch. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so I think we have power where we're supposed to now. Alright, now I'm going to turn them in. Let's see if this... Oh, no way. The locks work perfect. Okay. So the electrical part of the door locks worked perfectly, but the tumbler and the key didn't, so I had to actually burnish the edges of the key in order for that to work smoothly. That was the only problem I was dealing with there.